Well, today's the third message on prescription for worry based out of Psalm 37, as I just said. Well, do you wrestle with worry? Well, all of us worry. It's natural, and there's nothing wrong with having some worry in our life. But there are times when we can be way overboard with worry, right, and obsessed with worry, and there are times when things happen to us that produce the worry like that. Worry is that anxiety we feel when we try to anticipate future outcomes. What's going to be the result of this? How is that going to turn out? And you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the outcome is, so you worry, and that's that anxiety. And I think worry in some ways is a bit of a psychological trick that we think somehow in our mindset by worrying, we can somehow control the outcomes or shape them in some way, right? If I worry hard enough, the outcome I hope will come about. Or at the very least, and this can be a positive aspect of worry, it may help us to be prepared for some eventualities, right? Of course, we know that worrying really doesn't change the outcomes. In fact, most of the things we worry about never happen at all. That's true. It doesn't change the outcomes. It just sort of makes us miserable while we wait, doesn't it? Well, let's briefly review what we have learned from the psalmist so far and the wisdom that he has imparted from the perspective of faith. The first time, we said there are three heart decisions that we must make. Those three core commitments that you make and your determination about the way you're going to live your life. And these three heart decisions can serve as sort of the infrastructure, the foundation and the pillars of the structure of our lives that will prepare us to deal with things that come at us in life so that we can manage and control worry, or at least control worry or manage worry in a healthy way. Those three decisions are: we have to decide to trust in the Lord. That is, make God the reference point for our life, the very anchor, as the song was talking about, the anchor for our lives, that we don't just try to live our lives and have God as a compartment in a space in our life somewhere that we call on when we're in trouble, but that we center and anchor our lives. And we've got God the reference point for our life. That's trusting in the Lord rather than just ourselves. The second one, the heart decision, decide to do good. That is, when it comes to, when you're going to do something that contributes to well-being, your own well-being, to other people, the planet's well-being. Make it your life choice to proactively, when I have a choice to make, when I got to do something, I'm going to do good. And we said that John Wesley's general rules, the first general rule was do no harm, and the second was do all the good you can. He must have been reading this psalm. So that's the second decision. I'm not going to just try to manipulate and squirm my way through life. I'm going to do good no matter what. Even if it costs me, I'm going to do good. And then the third heart decision is commit your way to the Lord. Commit your way sort of had two senses, we said. In one sense, the whole direction of your life and focus of your life, commit that to God. But also we said that daily list that you make out, many people make lists, as you go through the nitty-gritty everyday life, entrust that way to the Lord as well. And if we make those three kind of decisions and that puts our lives in a certain direction and founded on that relationship with the living God, those will put us in a way to deal with whatever life throws at us and be able to deal with the worries of life. Last week, we talked about taking delight in the Lord, and this is sort of a result of making those three heart decisions, that we can take delight in the Lord, and it has us focus once again on God because we take delight in God's excellencies. The fact that God is our creator and is so good as a God, that God helps us, that God shows mercy and compassion to us. And we delight in God's presence, the presence in the world around us, the presence in other people, the presence in our own soul. And we said that we can cultivate that sense of God's presence and a sensitivity at an intuitive level to the presence of God. And we can take delight in that and have a joy come up. Even when things are going wrong, we can have that joy. And so when we take delight in the Lord, it gives us a confidence in who is with us. Because one of the things about worry is you can talk about outcomes and what may happen all day long, but the important thing is who is going through this with you, right? Who's going through it with you? The who is the key, not the what. The who is the key. So we trust God in all circumstances, situations, and outcomes, even in the face of worst-case scenarios. So we overcome worry, or we manage worry, by aligning ourselves with God, excuse me, and trusting the outcomes to God. Well, today we're listening deeply to verse 7. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret over those who prosper in their way, over those who carry out evil devices. When we've done all of these things, we've made these 3 heart decisions, we're taking delight in the Lord, what do? We've trusted things to God. We sit still and wait. For some of us, this may be the hardest part, dealing with worry, isn't it? Yeah, I've trusted it to God, but my gosh, nothing's happening. Be still and wait. I don't know about you, but if I have to wait in line over a minute, I can pull out my phone and distract myself. I'm sure none of you have to do that, you know. I don't really like that habit, but I found I've started doing it, and I use it just to distract myself, and there's this mental impatience that is really exacerbated by that habit. I'm going to have to focus on that and deal with it, But why would the psalmist tell us to be still and wait before the Lord? Being still and waiting is a way to put your trust in action. Ooh, action and waiting don't sound the same. That's irony. This is the irony of it all. When you're being still and waiting, you're making your trust active. Waiting is active trust. Let that sink in a little bit. Waiting is active trust. You've done your part. You've done all you can do. You prayed, you've given it over to God. Oh, God, help me. I trust you, and I believe you're going to act. And then while you wait, that's where the trust is active. You're trusting. You're not doing anything. What are you doing? You're trusting. Waiting is active trust. That is the doing part at that point. Once you've done all you can do, once you've handed it to God, what you can do is trust. And what you trust, you know what happens when you're trusting? You're waiting for God to act. It's sort of stepping back and letting God work in God's time, which is never my time, I assure you that, in God's way. That waiting is letting God work in God's timing and trusting that that God's timing is right, even though it's certainly not according to my schedule, and trusting that God's way of dealing with it is good, and God's got it in hand. While we wait, we're letting God produce the outcome as God wishes without our trying to control it. That's one of the issues of worry, isn't it? The control issue. When we're waiting, which is active trust, it's a way of letting God produce the outcome the way God wants to, instead of us trying to do that. You know, in a very simple way, when you ask somebody to do something, then what do? You wait until they do it, right? I was thinking about a tax time. What I have to do, my part, I have to get all my documentation and data together. I hand it to my tax preparer. Then what do? I wait. I don't prepare the taxes. The tax guy does. He prepares the taxes. And when he's finished, when he's got it all done, he hands it back to me along with the bill, right? I do what I can do. I hand him what he needs. Then I wait. And when he's done, not my time, in his time, he hands it back to me. That's such a simple illustration, but that's sort of the way it is with the way we work in our faith. Well, how does waiting and being still help with our worry? Well, the waiting and the being still is not what deals with the worry. The trusting is what deals with the worry. But there's some benefits to that. Being still, in that time of being still, it reminds us of in whom we're trusting. Why are you waiting? Well, I have nothing else to do, but I have entrusted it to someone else. That being still and waiting is sort of a way of reaffirming in whom we are entrusting this to God. It helps us to recenter our trust in God, to go back to those 3 heart decisions and to be refreshed in those 3 heart decisions. It helps us to recenter our trust in God. And the being still and waiting is helpful. It helps us release control of the outcomes. When you're trusting, that active trusting by waiting, you're releasing control of the outcomes to God. You know, the Bible tells us to cast our care on Him, but we do that quite hesitantly. And what we tend to do is cast our cares on Him, and then when it doesn't get done quick enough, or we're worried that it's not being done the right way, we want to grab it back and take care of it ourselves. But this psalm said, no, be still and wait on the Lord. God will act. But a mature faith can be still and wait and trust for God to act in God's timing, in God's way. Because our living faith knows that God not only will act, that God is acting. I may not see it, I may not feel it, but God is there working. There's a couple other passages that go along with this that I really like. One is from Psalm 46, verse 10. Yeah, there we go. I love this one. Be still and know that I am God. I think that's one of the reasons we need to be still. It takes us back to who? The who. Be still and know that I am God. It's not up to us. We are living life and sharing life with God and God with us. God's holding on to us and we're holding on to God, like the song said today. This next verse is sort of like after God has acted. Okay? God's already come through and God's done His part. It says, then you will know that I am the Lord. Those who wait for me shall not be put to shame. Boy, don't you love those times when you have done this, you've done all you could, and you put it in God's hands, you've trusted God, and then God comes through for you, how that feels? It goes beyond gratitude, doesn't it? That feeling. But it's also, it brings in a deeper trust and connection with, hey, I know God's got my back. And the next thing that comes along may be much more difficult, and I can go there with Him because I've already seen that. Those who wait for me shall not be put to shame. I think we can bring this home with a personal story. I want to share an experience I had of having to do what the psalmist has been talking about. Diane and I came back to the States in June of 2014 from 27 years of missionary work, and I was hired by United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio, and they were graciously made me the director of non-degree programs. I supervised about 6 people. We had a women's center, we had a urban ministry center, we had a new online educational Spanish language program that I had to oversee, the course of study which prepares Methodist local pastors, various kinds of things. It was quite an engaging job. But a little beknownst to me, the seminary had serious financial problems. I didn't know anything about it. They hired me anyway. So that was great. I was just going along doing my job, having a great time. And then in February of 2016, I was fired. I wasn't fired because I wasn't doing my job or anything wrong with me. It's just they had to cut $250,000 before the end of the fiscal year, which was June. And I was in the 3rd round of layoffs. They laid off a top person in enrollment management the same day they laid me off. And so I had 30 minutes to get my personal stuff off my computer and walk out the door. And it was a traumatic experience, as you can imagine. I began to worry, brothers and sisters. I began to worry. That's for sure. How in the world? We had a mortgage, the first home we ever bought in our life. We had a mortgage. We had 2 cars that we were paying off. And you know what? State unemployment will barely put beans on your table. It's not going to worry about your mortgage and your cars and all this other stuff. Those of you who've been there know that. So I went through the internal panic mode, and of course the woe is me, feeling sorry for myself, and I must be a big failure, knowing all along that it wasn't my fault. It was the seminary's issue. I happened to be caught up in it as a collateral damage. But I'm a person of faith, and I approached it with faith. I even asked when the president told me that he was going to let me go. When we were done, I asked him to pray for me. He was a retired pastor, had been a pastor most of his career, not a seminary educator, and he prayed for us and our family. So we dealt with it from faith from the beginning, but we had to go through all of the feelings and the fears and everything else that any person would face when they lost their job and have all these obligations. But I took action that same day. What can I do? The few things that I could do. Well, one is I signed up for state unemployment. The HR office told me how to do that. And sign up for unemployment. Never done that, had no clue about that. Then I sent 2 emails. One to Ben Witherington, who's one of the top New Testament scholars in the world. He teaches at Asbury Seminary. But I've known him for 30, we're not close friends or anything, but I've known him for 30 years. And I knew that Asbury had some Spanish language stuff here in their Orlando campus, and I just thought, I have no idea what's going on with the school. Maybe they have something where they could use me. I don't know. So I emailed him. Then I emailed Joel Green, who was the provost at Fuller Seminary in California. Joel and my brother-in-law grew up together in Cooper, Texas, and Joel worked when he was in college, or was he in seminary? College or I think it was seminary. Worked as a youth director one summer for my dad. So I knew Joel. We kept in touch over the years. And he was an incredible guy. He's the provost at Fuller. So I wrote those 2 guys. And then I prayed, of course. And then I had to wait. And let me tell you, applying for jobs for unemployment is not fun. It's quite an eye-opening experience to have to go on Indeed and Monster and these other sites every day looking for jobs, see what's available, what they require, how little they pay. You know, that was not a good experience. But I did what I could, and then I'm sitting there waiting. And sometimes I didn't have to wait all that much. To my astonishment, here's when God begins to act. It can astonish you. The same day I sent the email to Ben Witherington, within a short time after that, he wrote me back and said, I just talked to the president. What? I had sent him my CV, and he said, I just talked to the president, and he said, I told him, I can't think of anyone better to work with Spanish language stuff than Mark Abbott, and send him your CV tomorrow. Okay, so the next day I emailed the president, and that's so I was fired on a Thursday. On a Friday, I sent my CV to the president, and on Monday, he responded, said, I'm traveling for a week or so, but when I'm coming back, I'm going to gather some people together. We're going to talk about this. Wow. I also got an email from Joel, and he said, we're looking for a vice president to head up our campus in Houston. At our campus in Houston, there's going to be a search opening very soon. Would you be interested? I go, whew, it's way beyond what I was thinking. So, but again, these are just possibilities. But it gave me some encouragement. We had to live in the meantime. Well, I did have that phone call. They gave me an interview in Wilmore, which is where the headquarters of Asbury Seminary is. And to make a long story short, I was hired, and I was able to begin relocate down here. And so I was unemployed for 4 months. So how does Psalm 37 apply to that experience? First of all, I had built an infrastructure of faith in my life. I had a history of trust. I'd had plenty other worries in life before this, gone through plenty other kind of crises, etc. And the infrastructure was there and held. It held for me. It didn't destroy, that situation didn't destroy me. I had to go through the feelings that anyone goes through, but the infrastructure was built into my life. And I looked to God from the very beginning, and I got the news. I turned to the Lord. I didn't just plan to going it alone. I look God to guide me, to provide for us, our family, to fulfill God's purpose for my life. You know, it's sort of tough when you've been in ministry, Christian ministry, your whole life and think about having to sell insurance or I don't know, go wash dishes somewhere, whatever. Nothing wrong with those jobs. But I say, what a waste of human resource, you know, in a sense. So I did everything I could do, and I enlisted support from where I knew to reach out for support, including the state. But God is the one who acted. God is the one who acted. God is the one who vindicated me. So I responded to the situation from faith and with faith. And God did his part. How do you manage worry as a child of God? Align yourself with God. Trust the outcomes to him and be faithful. Because waiting is a form of active trust. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him.